Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Melchizedek Chronicles. It's me, your host, Kenny Williamson, and today we're going to be talking just a little bit more about Satan's little season. Now, the only reason that I was going to talk about that again is I have seen multiple. If you go on X or anything like that, that's all they're pushing, seems like. They're pushing Satan's little season. We're in Satan's little season. And they come up with stuff called Tartaria, which proves it. We're going to talk about a little bit about that stuff. But what we're going to do this time is, of course, I did one here a while back and said, Satan's little season has not happened yet. And I don't understand, but a lot of people commented telling me that we were not in Satan's little season, and I didn't understand. And I was like, well, did you listen to the podcast? I don't think we're in Satan's little season. That's not biblical. So, make a long story short, we're going to go over a couple of different scriptures this time to maybe kind of clarify some things, okay? So, if you don't know what Satan's little season is, okay, just to kind of give you a timeline, a Bible timeline, basically now we're in what you would call the church age. After the church age, what ends it is what you would call the rapture, or the catching away of the body of Christ. Then you enter into a time of tribulation, which the Bible calls Jacob's trouble. That period is 7 years long. Okay, after that 7 years of tribulation, then Jesus Christ returns. He returns to the Mount of Olives, and he then basically kills all of the people who have been against him and who are not saved. So the ones that are left, that are saved, that were on earth, they get to go into what's called the millennial kingdom. The millennial kingdom is 1,000 years where Christ literally reigns from Israel over there, I guess in Jerusalem. Okay? So he's going to be physically here on the earth, ruling and reigning with an iron fist. So people who had died and went to heaven, lots of those people, not all probably, but some, most, they're going to come back with Christ during his Armageddon, when he comes back at the end of the 7 years of tribulation. And a lot of those people are going to be teachers and that kind of stuff in the millennial kingdom. So you'll be there, let's say, hypothetically myself will be there as a teacher or something, teaching people who are actual flesh and blood, who survived Jacob's trouble. They went into the millennial kingdom. And so the millennial kingdom, we have some new rules. Okay, so the devil has been put into hell, or the bottomless pit. So he's not running around. Animals and stuff become tame again. So, like the Bible says, you have the wolf will lay with the lamb. A child can pick up a snake and play with it. A child can lead animals around. Animals, lions, tigers, all that, they'll eat grass, hay. There will be no murders as far as animals killing people. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's almost like the Garden of Eden. Okay, it's not the Garden of Eden, but it's about as close as you're going to get after that. So you're going to get this for 1,000 years with Christ reigning and ruling and reigning. So, now there's still people, they're regular people, so there's still going to be some sin. And that's why there's rules. And, it says Christ will be ruling. And I'm assuming that if he does the kind of ruling that they did back in his day when he was alive on earth, there's not going to be prisons. It's going to be, you're going to be probably punished right at that moment for when you do something. But that's neither here nor there. That goes on for 1,000 years. Okay, so everybody's been living for 1,000 years. People living way longer. People are several hundred years old before they die. Lots of people are being born during this time. And so after the 1,000 years, it says that for a very short little season, Satan is going to be loosed from the bottomless pit, and he is going to be able to go basically out and deceive people. And during this season that he's out deceiving people, he's turning people against Christ, people that have been living in this millennial kingdom this whole time, but, they're like, I don't really like having all these rules and regulations, and I'm getting fed, and the animals are tame, but I just don't like it. I wanted something different. So Satan shows up, and I'm sure, with his typical nothing but lies, I'm sure he says, "Oh, I'm gonna give you something better, way better," and so they fall for it. And he managed to amass some armies, and these armies come against Christ in Jerusalem, and Christ has fire and brimstone fall down from heaven and burns them all up. And then he takes Satan and he casts him into the bottomless pit. So, now, just by listening to that story alone, when Satan's little season is going on, Christ is still on his throne. He's still ruling. Satan doesn't fool everybody. He gets an army amassed, but he's not fooling everybody. There's still no telling how many people that are just, following Christ like usual. And the animals don't go crazy. It doesn't say that. It just says Satan's loose for a little season. So, and then he comes against Christ on his throne. And so, Christ is still there. So this whole thing about we're in Satan's little season right now, this is what they claim. They claim that we are in Satan's little season. So resurrection is past, the tribulation is past, everything's in the past, and so now we're just kind of floating around out here, but the only logical explanation for them is that we must be in Satan's little season. But obviously they don't read their Bible, that's a given. And so they say, well, here's our proof. And they pull out this Tartaria thing, okay, where all of a sudden, after all these years, and I've been around for 50 years, okay, after all these years, when AI came out, like it is, now we have pictures of these buildings that are these huge monuments, that are completely buried. And we have these pictures of them unearthing them, and they've dug way down, and it shows all this stuff. And so they're using these pictures as proof that these buildings have been around for, thousands of years, and, the government's hiding everything from us. Well, I guess I could say yes and no on that. Here's the thing. I think that majority of these pictures that you see are fake. Okay, they're AI generated. They're completely fake. That's why they've just surfaced recently. Okay, I saw one the other day that had this big castle and everything, and it looked real. And the thing was sitting on like a, wheels. It had a cart type thing under it, a huge cart being pulled by a whole, herd of donkeys or mules or whatever. And it's like, okay, that does not exist. That's fake. It looks like a real building, and it looks like it's real, but it's AI. Nobody has built a castle on top of a cart and being pulled around by horses. I'm talking a castle that's huge. Okay, it's fake. And so lots of these pictures are completely erroneous. However, here's where the truth comes in. Okay, people in the past were smarter than what we are today, much smarter. They had, they lived a lot longer way back, and they were way smarter. And lots of things were done and built back then by those people. Okay, lots of things were built prior to the flood that would literally blow your mind. Okay, the technology they had far supersedes what we have now, but it was lost. God allowed it to be destroyed. And a lot of the buildings, if any of these pictures are even real, they were I mean, they were buried in the flood. That's all there is to it. So, I mean, it's really just that simple. And so if you find something, of course, they try to date it as something ridiculous. The world's only 6,000 years old. I say the world, the planet. It's not even a planet. The Earth, okay? It's not a planet out in space. The Earth, according to the Bible, is only about 6,000 years old. So these buildings were built somewhere between then and now. And so if they're buried, they were built probably pre-flood, maybe right after the flood. I mean, a lot of stuff went on after the flood too, with King Nimrod, and building the Tower of Babel. They were building some big buildings back then. So they had some knowledge. And, God separated them and stuck them all out. But, maybe have you ever thought about, like, you go to these different countries. Let's say it's China. It's over here in Mexico. It's in Egypt. And you see these same type of buildings, like the Step Pyramid. You see these same exact structures all over the earth. And people are like, well, how did they get there? Well, a lot of these people were together back at the Tower of Babel. When God separated them and stuck them all over, they might have all spoke different languages, and they had grouped together by languages or whatever, but they can still remember what they saw. And they were seeing these things built, I'm sure, so they just went out and replicated it. And so that's why you've got people all over the world building the exact same thing. But they weren't able to communicate, I mean, back then they were separated out, but they remembered what they saw, so they just built what they knew. And the technology was way better back then. We can't understand that because we're still, we're too stuck on iPhones and AI and GPS, that kind of stuff. And we believe everything now our government says, propaganda. All fake lies and propaganda. So, of course, your average person is going to say, hey, we're way smarter now than we were back then. They were dumb back then. No, they were smart. They were really smart. We're really dumb right now. And everything is getting worse, not better. The government will tell you that we're evolving, because we came from monkeys and we're always getting better. But based on the Bible, what they were doing biblical times, we're actually getting worse, not better. And, I think the average lifespan, they're saying for a man now is like 70 years. 70 years. I mean, it's getting worse and worse and worse all the time. Of course, we're being poisoned and everything else all the time. What do you expect? But the reason I believe this Satan's Little Season deal is that has the traction it has is being pushed by the government and devils, because they don't want you to know that, we're fixing to have a rapture type scenario here in the near future. They don't want you to know about anything like that. They want you to believe that, the Big Bang happened and that whole thing. And so we're evolving. And if they were to admit that there were giants and their people were geniuses 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, I mean, that would kind of spoil, people will start asking questions because it doesn't make any sense. So they want you to think we're evolving into what we are and we're the best we've ever been. And in fact, according to the Bible, we're going the opposite and we're the worst we've ever been. So you need to keep that in mind. But like I have people, tell me now, of course, I need to back some of this stuff up with Scripture. But just to kind of talk about, let's see here. Let me pull this screen up here. There we go. I've got it highlighted here. Let's see here. I've got it highlighted. In Revelation 20, verse 3, it says, and this is talking about the 1,000 years, it says, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. So this right here is the verse of Satan's little season. There it is. That's it. Satan's little season. Okay. Let's get this where I can see it. Okay. So now, Satan's little season, and they claim we're in Satan's little season. and this Satan's little season's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. Well, how long is Satan's little season? Now, I have said before, I have no idea. I don't know how long this little season's going to be. But these different verses that I've looked into here may give us an idea of how long his little season is based on what the Bible talks about other seasons, okay? So we know he's going to be loosed for a little season during or at the end of this 1,000-year millennium, okay? So let's go to Revelation 6, okay, verse 11, which should be right here. Now, I've got that highlighted for you if you can see it. If you can't, I'm going to read it to you. Revelation 6:11 says, "And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season until their fellow servants and also their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled." Okay, what that's talking about there is this is in Jacob's trouble. This is somewhere in the 7 years of tribulation. These guys got killed as martyrs, probably, and they're up in heaven. And they're basically asking God, when are they going to be revenged, okay? And basically, they're given some white robes, and it said they're told, rest for a little season until all of these other fellow servants and stuff should be killed as you were. Well, they're all being killed during the 7 years of tribulation. These guys are already there, so that means the 7 years of tribulation's already started, okay? They got killed. They want to know when they're going to be avenged. And he says, well, just wait a little season until all your other fellow servants are killed as you were. So that's all happening within 7 years, you see? So if you were to go by this little season, a little season would be 7 years or less, because this thing here is happening in a 7-year period. Okay, you got that? So 7 years. Okay, so let's go over here to what the Bible calls a long season. So we know what it refers to when it refers to a little season here. It's 7 years or less. But let's go to a long season. Okay, we're going to go over here to Joshua 24:7. Let's see here. Okay, so Joshua 24:7. I got it highlighted there for you. Excuse me. It says, "And when they cried unto the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and brought the sea upon them, and covered them." Of course, that's obviously the Red Sea crossing, right? "And your eyes have seen what I have done in Egypt, and ye dwelt in the wilderness a long season." Okay? So anybody that reads their Bible, any Christian that goes to church should understand, every story told about the, Pharaoh, let my people go, and he leads them out into the wilderness. And Pharaoh follows him, right, and tries to kill him, and parts the sea. They walk through the sea on dry ground, and here comes Pharaoh and his men, and the sea closes back up and kills them all. And then they wander in the wilderness for how long? 40 years. That's a well-known established fact. This verse here is saying when they dwelt in the wilderness after this happened, that was a long season. So the Bible is calling 40 years a long season. Okay? And just to back that up, we can run over here to Acts real quick. Acts 7, verse 42. Scroll down here to 42. Let me highlight that for you. I'm going to read it for you anyway. There it is. Acts 7:42. "Then God turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, as it was written in the book of the prophets, O ye house of Israel. Have ye offered to me slain beasts and sacrifices by the space of 40 years in the wilderness?" Okay. So that's just one of those, it spells it out for you. 40 years in the wilderness. every time they talk about these Jews being in the wilderness, roaming around, it's after they got released from the Pharaoh, from bondage, okay, and they were, the whole let my people go type deal. So they were roaming around in the wilderness for 40 years. So, that's what Moses did. He went over there and let them out, and he wandered in the wilderness with them for 40 years. After that 40 years was up, they were able to go into the promised land, but Moses was not able to go because he had managed to sin somewhere in the process there when he was supposed to, talk to a rock, and instead he hit the rock, and he was instructed specifically by God to speak to the rock, and instead he hit it, so he got in trouble and said, oh, you're never going to see the promised land. Sorry. Everybody else gets to go see it, but you don't. So they were wandering around for 40 years. That's a well-known, established fact. Everybody knows it. So the Bible calls that 40 years a long season. Okay? We've got saints up in heaven waiting for the end of the tribulation time, which is the end of Jacob's trouble. And it's only 7 years, and he calls that a little season. So, let's see, I've also got Luke 23:8 listed here. Let's go take a look at that. Luke 23:8. Okay. This right here is just, this doesn't have a time stamp on it, so this is a conjecture type thing, I guess you'd call it. But, this is talking about King Herod, and it says, and when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he was desirous to see him for a long season, because he had heard many things of him. He hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. So Herod had been waiting to see Jesus for a long season. Well, Herod only lived probably to be 100 or less. I don't know that it tells us how old he was. So he'd been waiting a long season. So one could say that he was waiting for, 20, 30, 40 years to see the guy, and he finally saw him. He didn't wait a little season, only 7 years. He waited a long season. So he must have waited about half his life. He probably heard about him when he was young, and he's ending the end of his life, and he's always wanted to meet him, and boom, he finally gets to meet him. I mean, that's not unreasonable. But we know that Herod didn't live to be 250 years old. Nobody at that time was living to be that old. They were all 120 or less. Okay, so we know he didn't live to be 300 or 400 years old. So, and that's a long season. Okay, 40 years in the wilderness is considered a long season. And then we've got our 7 years little season. So these gurus that come onto Facebook or wherever it is they're at, X, wherever, and they're like, we're in Satan's little season right now, and Satan's season has been lasting for the last 250 years. The reason they're saying that, number one, the Bible doesn't support that at all. We actually kind of know what the Bible says here. We know what God said is a little season, and we know what he said a long season is. So there's no reason to think that he's changed that up when he's talking about Satan, okay? But these guys want to put Satan's little season so many years back, that way nobody can remember anything. See, all the people that lived 200 or 300 years ago are dead. So it's pretty easy to come up and say, oh, well, we're in Satan's little season, and it started 300 years ago, and the reason you don't know that is because you weren't alive, see? So you don't know. You don't understand that we're in Satan's little season right now. We're not in the church age. We're just running around going crazy. Well, no, that's not it. In fact, even if we were in Satan's little season, okay, if we were in Satan's little season right now, Christ would still be on his throne in Jerusalem, running it, ruling. We would still have animals that are normal, that are not eating each other. You wouldn't have to worry about getting ate up by a lion, okay, because they're grass eaters. Nothing else changed as far as I can tell, except that Satan was loosed in this little season. Doesn't mean everything went to pot, you know. So I don't see Christ on his throne. I don't see any of that stuff. And we know that it didn't happen a long time ago because, I mean, when Christ comes back, you know, the first time, before the millennial kingdom, you know, during Armageddon, we're talking half of the earth burned up, everything destroyed, mountains knocked down. We still have all that stuff. So all that had to have happened before Christ comes back in the 1,000-year millennium, and then we have all this perfect stuff going on, and then we have Satan's little season. So I guess they're trying to claim that this Tartaria thing was during the millennial kingdom is when this stuff was built, or either that, I don't know. But, you know, all I know is that, you know, we've got all these pictures of these things, like I said, that are showing up left and right, and people are claiming that these things are being found all over now. And I think it's AI. It's AI pictures. Because, you know, these pictures have never been around. Nobody's ever mentioned it. There's been news and history books for many, many, many years, and none of this stuff has ever turned up. Not like what they're showing now. And, you know, I mean, that's just the way it is. There were people smarter years ago. I mean, we have monuments, like, I say monuments, buildings in other countries, you know, in Egypt and all kinds of stuff that are, you know, that we can't build today. Somebody clearly built them, you know, and so it was our ancestors. They were way smarter. They had technology we don't understand. It was either lost in the flood or it was lost sometime after that. So now, you know, back then we had men that were actually getting out and doing stuff, and they had the knowledge to do it. Our men today, if you want to call them men, I mean, they've got them so, you know, all the majority of men growing up today, if you even want to call them that, they're too busy on their iPhones, sitting around playing video games. That's all they know. They can't walk outside and check there's oil in their car. Most of them don't even want a car. They're like, well, why would I want a car? I'm not going to drive. Why would I want a bill? You know, why would I want to have to pay for anything? I'm going to sit down here in my parents' basement until they die, and hopefully I'll inherit the house. I'm just going to sit here, you know, and eat potato chips and play video games. I mean, we've got some of the dumbest society now that I've ever seen. And I'm out in this stuff every day working for a living. And a high percentage of the people that I meet these days, I mean, they know nothing. They don't know anything about a vehicle. They can't check oil. They can't change a tire. They don't know what any of that means. They don't know how to take a lug nut off. They don't know how to unscrew a nut and a bolt. And I'll tell people this all the time when I'm working with them. I'm like, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. You know, because they literally, if you try to get them to turn something off or on, they cannot do it. They don't know which way to turn it. And if you say, turn it to the left, loosen it, they don't act like they know what the left is. They don't know their left hand from their right hand. Nobody's ever taught them that. They don't know how to change a tire. They don't know how to check their oil. They don't know how to write a check, that's for sure. The fact they don't know how to write. The only thing they can do is print. And most can't even hardly do that. So to say that we're evolving into something higher is a joke. It's a flat joke. You would have to be a blooming idiot to believe that. But, you know, that's what our government wants you to believe. That's what they want. That's where this whole, you know, Agenda 2030, which I'll talk about that later, is coming in, and these 15-minute cities and stuff. That's what they want. They want you to be like a little worker bee, like a drone. All you know is a few things. You know how to eat. use the bathroom, and play video games. That's it. Just sit there. We'll pay you a measly salary. You don't need a car. You don't need a house. You don't need any gardening. Sit in a little bitty tiny cubicle type apartment, and we'll pay you for that. We'll pay for it. You have to do what we say, of course, but we'll pay for it, and we'll pay for your food stamps, so you get your food. You don't really have any salary because you don't need any money. We'll supply your electric, we'll supply your house, and we'll supply your food. You just sit there and play your games. Now, when we tell you to go out, and do something like take medicine for a disease you don't have, you do it, or we'll cut something back. We tell you to do this, you do it, or we'll cut something back. We'll kick you out, and you won't have anything. And you have no brain because we didn't teach you anything. So, these kids that are coming out of these public schools today, at least the ones around here, the only thing they seem to be learning in there is filth and pornography. They come out of these schools today, like these high schools, like the ones around here. They can't barely tie their own shoes, but they can't drive. They can't balance a checkbook. They can't do anything. They can't sew a button on. They can barely read. They read at about a first grade level when they graduate high school. They can't pronounce anything. They don't understand anything. Everything's done on a computer or AI, on a cell phone. And but one thing they do understand, they know all about drinking, they know lots of cuss words, and somehow they know all about sex and perversion. They can tell you everything about that, anything you ever wanted to know and more. But they don't know anything else. So, of course, they come out. If they went in as a Christian, they probably come out as an atheist, unless they've got a decent parent at home. Because they teach you, the very first thing they teach you is you came from a monkey, from the Big Bang. You're nobody, okay? You're just taking up space. You're carbon. You have a carbon footprint. You need to reduce that footprint. You need to do everything you can to cut back. Now, everybody else, they can have anything they want, but you're nobody. You came from nothing, and you're going to return to nothing. That's what they teach. Oh, and by the way, you're on a spinning water ball in outer space that's there by accident, all by the Big Bang. Everything is a freak chance of nature. So that's what they teach, and that's what these kids think. And that's why they start thinking, I've heard younger kids, all they talk about now is equality. Black lives matter. Okay, not all lives. No, just black lives. So, how about all lives matter? How about everybody's equal? Oh, no. If you say that, you're racist. So say you can't say that across the board for all people because you're racist. You have to select only certain groups of people, and then you have to support them. And if you don't, then you're racist. It can't be everybody. It has to be just them. That's the kind of stuff they teach now. They're teaching your kids there's more than two genders. And you can't assume anybody's gender. Can you assume my gender? If you saw me walking around, you might think I'm a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, but you're not going to assume I'm a woman. I would hope not. Okay? Come on now. But that's what they're teaching these people. You can't say him and her. You can't say mother and father. You can't say any of that stuff anymore. So try to convince me that we're getting smarter. No, we're getting dumber. But that's what the government wants. Okay? They want you dumb and not understanding anything, so you'll do what you're told. You'll be compliant. They don't want people to think for themselves and say, hey, what do you mean? What are you talking about? We can't have that. Then you might not do something we want you to do. Okay, see, we'd had a little test on that back in 2020, didn't we? if you want to call it little. I mean, we have our Hollywood, we've got all of our politicians, and we've got everybody, telling you to go get something that you don't need. Go get it. You have to. And then they make up fake lies and, tell you people are dying when they're not. Did you know, come to find out, most of the people that died from this disease that showed up, they didn't die at home. They died in the hospital. The ones that stayed at home survived. Okay? So I'd think long and hard about that before you run to a doctor and believe anything that they say. Now, I'm not saying there aren't a few good ones out there. And there are some that tried to come forward and immediately lost their license. So all I know is the ones around here that I've heard about, the only thing they're interested is to get you on a pharmaceutical. Multiple. And if they have it their way, you will have 10 or 15 ones before you leave. You'll have to take 10 or 15 different ones all day, every day, from now on. And the more you take, the sicker you get. Okay? That's what they want. So there's a whole lot going on besides, but this thing here with like my whole subject was this Satan's little season. They're throwing everything they can out there to confuse people. And, if you don't open up your Bible and read it and do some praying, you may actually fall for it. They want you to think that you're in Satan's little season. All this stuff is past, so there's no hope for you. So you said they're trying to get you on both ends, you see. On one end, they tell you that there is no God. It's all Big Bang. You're on a water ball out in outer space, floating around, at millions of miles an hour, spinning out of control, and eventually you're going to hit something, or something's going to hit you and kill you. Or if you do believe in God, well, let's say, that's already come and gone. That happened a long time ago. You missed it. So now we're in Satan's little season. That's why it's so bad around here. The crime is so high because we're in Satan's little season. That's why. So it's fixing to all be over, and you missed the boat. So you're dead anyway, is what they're wanting you to think. Well, they're wrong. They're liars. They're devils. I've ran across a lot of liars and a lot of devils, and I'm going to read some more in some of these magazines I've got, and I'm going to show you some more liars and devils. Of course, these guys, according to them, they're top notch. They're the bee's knees, according to them. In fact, I talked some of the comments that I've got on some of my latest podcasts. One of them said, this is the most judgmental thing I've ever heard. So? Now, don't tell me you don't think you can judge somebody. Oh, you didn't read your Bible. Oh, you just read the first line and didn't read the rest? No, it says, judge not, yet ye be judged by the same manner in which you judge them. That's what it means. You, as a Christian, I can judge you if I see you doing something you're not supposed to be doing. Now, if I'm doing the same thing, I can't judge you on it, can I? As it says, you need to remove the plank out of your eye before you look at somebody's splinter. So in other words, if I'm out here committing adultery and lying and cheating and doing all this stuff, but I call you out for it, well, how can I judge you for it when I'm doing it? Okay, but I try not to do that stuff. I don't do that stuff. So if I'm not doing it and I'm a Christian and I see a married man purposely cheating on his wife, I can tell him, hey, that's adultery. You shouldn't be doing that. How dare you judge me? Hey, that's what you're going to be judged on in the future. You ain't getting away with it. So is that judging somebody? Yes, it is. Now, I'm not judging their salvation, but I can judge you by your actions. Okay, so if you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing as a Christian, another Christian should tell you, look, you can't do that. Are you being judged? Well, yeah, you're being judged for your actions. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to fornicate or have adultery or whatever it is you're doing. Okay, so, how dare you say that? That's the most judgmental thing I've ever said. And this came off the Aussie when I was talking about the guy, they're claiming he was a Christian. Okay, and then in his interviews, the stuff he's saying is filthy about God, and he calls himself the Prince of Darkness, refers to himself as Satan. Okay, so my question is, how does a Christian refer to himself as a Prince of Darkness and get away with it? I mean, you're not acting like a Christian. You're not living like a Christian. You don't talk like a Christian. Everything comes out of your mouth is filth. And when you do finally mention God, it's in a filthy manner and it's disgusting. So don't look to me like you're really a Christian. Well, how dare you judge somebody? You're going to get judged eventually. God's going to judge you. But, anyway. I don't see how anybody have a problem with that. But anyway, so if you have any questions about Satan's little season, let me know. I hope that this, answered some of your questions. Let me know if it didn't. And please feel free to comment, share, whatever. This thing should be on Apple. It should be on all the stuff. Podcast, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're on Spotify and you have an account, which is free, you can see this video. It's also audio if you don't. Let's see. YouTube. Video will be on YouTube. So hopefully I can get up to Rumble, a few other things, but it should be definitely on Spotify and YouTube. So go check it out. And go check out our websites. It's flatbro.com, truthseekersministry.org, and, of course, kennywilliamson.com will take you to that one as well. So if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, please feel free to let me know. Until we meet again, God bless you.